Hello, I'm Jim Miller, and I'm here with Ron Bowers and Henry House. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. We learned this week that the Hagerstown Ice Amateur Athletic Association, which is a group that's affiliated with the Hagerstown Ice Rink and works on behalf of the city to manage that facility, has been working on an expansion project, including some more ice, but also an indoor sports complex, which we've heard a lot about, baseball stadiums and indoor sports complexes. So, Henry, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, when the ice rink was initially developed, they left area beside it that they could add on another rink or an indoor sports complex. I think the price tag's really stiff.
Well, it is, but is it not true that they presented one proposal that's...
Well, they rejected one, which was...
15 to 17 million or something like that?
Well, they fully rejected one that was in the $40+ million range.
Okay.
And they asked for this one, which I believe was a 14 to 17 million in that ballpark, to come back to them, and they wanted to explore it more. They thought it was too high. But I encourage them to explore what's around and available here. Okay, there's facilities in Frederick, there's facilities in Winchester. Can Hagerstown sustain the expense? Maybe it's justified the expense for more ice, but another indoor facility. Can we support that type of revenue and retire the debt? And where are we getting those funds from?
Well, Ron, I think there's at least one ice competition or ice hockey competition or whatever that they actually use facilities in other communities every year because we don't have the facilities to support it, and not to mention the fact that with this multi-purpose kind of indoor sports complex. What are your thoughts on it, Ron?
Based on how it's done, totally supportive. I've watched people from here drive all over, as you do with your kids now,
Absolutely.
To get them service. What people's failing to realize, that place is packed. The next thing is the Washington Capitals winning the National Hockey, League Stanley Cup last year. They brought more attention. They participate there. They put money into the rink. The rink people have already said they will raise money. They'll go out and raise a sizable amount of money, and I think they can. I think it's a win-win situation for the community.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, again, I haven't read enough about it to have a definitive opinion on everything associated with it, but I think that clearly we've demonstrated, at least in my view, a need for a multi-sport kind of indoor complex. And from a location, you were an ex-realtor. Those are the three key elements. I don't know that you could get much better. We've got we've got a park that's already built out there. We've got there's all kinds of amenities out there that I think lends itself. Plus, frankly, it's easy to get to. Whether you're coming from 81 or 70, it's a fairly easy drive.
Well, it's an organization that, what is it, Hagerstown
Ice Amateur Athletic Association,
yes,
or HIAAA.
And they have a tremendous group of officers running that and people behind them. They took a lot of folks with them to the meeting, but they're asking the council for guidance. What do you want to do? And they're proposing something now between $5 and $6 million. So what's the council want to do? The council's got financial issues, but you can't look at financial issues today as to what the future's going to be as you grow your town. But you can't get into a position like they did before. Remember when it first started? For a couple of years, it was...
Well, it was hit or miss.
Yes.
And the same thing with the facility that opened about the same time frame across the state line. They were struggling when...
Up in Sullivan.
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's a lady that gave money specifically for it, but she didn't give operating money. She gave money to build it, but not operating.
And, the challenge we have, and one of the interesting proposals was, instead of taking up more real estate, they were going to go vertical with this new addition, that they could put the ice and viewing stands around and then build another level that would accommodate other activities.
They were calling it a mezzanine, so
Right.
for people to be able to see for spectators.
But to incorporate court and turf components into a new facility, in my mind, that's got to bring some more people into our community.
I don't know that the turf is part of it now. I think that may be the part that's not there. I do think it'd be a good idea to get Pete Lowe or the president of that organization or one of the director to come on the show sometime. I think that would be good to analyze it. We've got a lot of good things going on in this community right now.
Absolutely, and we absolutely do, and especially in the city of Hagerstown.
Yes.
My question to you, though, Ron, to follow up the $5 to $6 million, there were proposals for the Maryland Theater, and I know that's a project that's very close to your heart.
Yes.
That were less money than the one we decided on. I don't think at this point in the juncture, I've heard many people say, and that's an oddity in this community, that we're doing the wrong thing by investing more money in the Maryland Theater. I've not heard that said, and I believe that. Does the same hold true for this sports complex? Should we go the extra mile? Should we build the AAA plus version of it rather than the thing that we're going to regret after a couple of years, potentially?
If it's a success now, which it certainly shows that it is, you want to get the people that's involved to raise the money to make it happen.
That's a good point, too. Henry, from a public-private partnership perspective, which is one of the things that the City Council was talking about, and I agree with it, what are your thoughts on that? How would you go about, I mean, that's going to be a tall order to fill.
It's going to be a tall order to fill, and part of it is the flashback to what happened when the facility was originally built and some of the accounting challenges that they had. Now, I think we have a very competent board that is running. And to give them credit, okay? So they're exonerated from past mistakes. The issue is our community willing to support? I think individuals in our community, businesses in our community, view it as a good contribution and good investment to develop things.
Go ahead.
Okay. My concern is where does the state, county, or city dollars come from? Are we going to have to sacrifice programs, or is there money, quote, available from the state for, like Project Open Space money to develop something along those lines that we can accommodate?
Well, I hate to beat this old drum, but how about a portion of the hotel motel tax? Because, clearly with the current rink, we're bringing people in from a lot of other communities during these events that are probably staying in our hotels and contributing to that high utilization rate we have, or occupancy rate we have in our hotels. I mean, I see that as an option. The other thing that I want to clarify, Ron, is the 54 or 36 or 54 million, whatever it was. There was two numbers in the article that I read. That was not this Hagerstown.
That was a Virginia-based.
Yeah, it was
group.
a Virginia-based sports facility management company.
Yeah.
And they were talking about redeveloping out at the municipal golf course, if memory serves.
Yeah, there's been several over the years attempts to develop the land at the old Hagerstown golf course, which is now Hamilton Greens at Hamilton Run.
Right.
And that blew up. That's not a good idea to talk about taking that golf course away. That's an institution here and probably be fought for a long time.
Yeah, understood. So, Ron, how would you go about raising the money? What are your thoughts in terms of getting the private investors? What does a private investor look like that might put money towards this type of a project?
Athletics, skating, ice rink itself, young families. Look at all the young families. Look, they talk about Generation X or the different generations. What do they want to do? The millennials, what do they want to do? I think that is what millennials and that generation is looking for. I see them really galvanized behind a fundraising effort to raise money. I think raising $6 million to build a nice rink with the leadership that they have, the sport, the Washington Capitals type thing would be a piece of cake to do.
So you're willing to chair that committee?
I wouldn't chair. I think Pete Lowe would.
I see what you're doing to
him. I've never even skated, much less do it. Do I like to watch the Caps play? Yes. Do I go down and see the Caps once in a while? Yes.
Or the
Would I go a
Hagerstown
lot
version of the Caps?
or whatever? But I do think it would work, and I think there is enough interest that it will fly. And my prediction is there will be another ice rink alongside of that in the next couple of years.
With the other indoor sports
I don't
amenities?
know that, now you just added another piece to the
Well, but that's
pie.
what they want. That's what the council wants. They want the turf components.
Is that
They
what-
yes, they want the turf components. They want the court components. They want the whole thing.
But if we put in a facility that accommodates what the Caps needs are, you probably are not going to have the real estate area that you can develop and put in the additional turf fields and ball courts.
When you go into the turf fields, ball courts, soccer fields and stuff, put an outdoor track and watch the guys that used to be runners years and years ago that are still the Mike Spindlers and the Terry Bakers and the Jeff Scuffins and all those people.
guys, yep.
Watch us guys come back and put money into it as long as it included a track. Build it that's got a whole lot of emphasis on outdoor sport, and you might be surprised what you could do with that. But people here don't think that way.
Well, it's the focus. I mean, I'm familiar with the indoor soccer venues, and they run essentially from 7 a.m. in the morning until 1 a.m. with games going every weekend. They run a couple nights a week doing adult league matches. Well, if I have a kid that participated in indoor soccer, I would welcome having it in my community.
How far would you say they drive to go there?
Some drive from Harrisonburg, Virginia to Winchester. So you're looking an hour and a half, 2-hour drive, because there's not much available. Most of us in Washington County, we might drive to Frederick, which is still 30 minutes or a little beyond.
Well,
So,
my daughter is getting into pole vaulting, and I took her to a pole vaulting clinic in Camp Hill, and we're very seriously considering putting her in pole vaulting classes in Camp Hill twice a week. So, that's an hour and 15-minute drive every time, but it's important, and people are recognizing the health benefits and the benefits for the children of getting them involved in these things early. At least I am as a parent. I can't speak for
How
everyone.
often is the ARC used at the college?
Oh, my goodness.
all the time.
When is it not used? That's the question.
The day was that Jim Brown said he wanted a basketball court. I said, and Brown, if he's watching, I said, Brown, we're not building a basketball court at the college, okay? So at the ARC, the senior citizens everybody got involved in that project. And they foresaw the things, the flower and garden shows and things.
Right.
Well, guess what just happened to be in the middle of all that space? A basketball court.
Right.
And that basketball court is used for far more than a basketball court. And that's what you have to do with this facility.
But is the fairground site where the existing ice rink is there enough real estate there to develop a facility similar to what the ARC is, and also accommodate for the parking needs that's going to create?
If you look at how much space the ARC sits on, it's not a lot of space.
It's not a lot.
Yeah,
And frankly,
but
I
the
think there's
parking is a
probably better
challenge.
parking at the ice rink at this point than there,
But that's before you add in
No, I get
multiple
it.
courts that are going to be attracting more families and
I get it.
and
Well,
whatnot.
it can be laid out.
Yeah.
It can be laid out.
All right, so Ron, you're going to have the last word on that. That's the good news for A block. Now, the bad news for B block is there is a lot going on with this University of Maryland Medical Systems and the questions around ethics and their board of directors. We have some more data on that. We'll give that to you in about 3 minutes after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Well, there's a lot of talk in Annapolis. There's a lot of talk in Maryland about the University of Maryland Medical Systems Board of Directors and ethics concerns. Now, the Maryland legislators are weighing in. Ron, what do we know about this situation? Are there that many? I mean, I've seen multiple concerns over deals with multiple board directors, multiple board members. is this a problem that is, how big a problem is this?
I think it's a problem that they want to deal with. The governor and the president of the Senate have addressed it with the chair of University of Maryland Hospital, Birch, and CEO Shernick. They know that there's problems. They know that it has to be dealt with. There's 3 people that's resigned now. I think the latest I heard, maybe the mayor of Baltimore.
She did resign.
Yeah, has resigned because of the selling of books that weren't really sold.
Right.
There's other people. But I'm going to tell you, fellas, this is not just down there. This is all over. Okay? Don't go speaking too much about the University of Maryland Hospital.
So that was actually
and the issue when we've got the same kind of issues around here that we don't deal with.
Well, we may have the same kind of issues. We
Okay.
won't.
Well, but the point is, there's a problem there.
People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
There you go. But
yeah, I get that.
And down there, what are they doing? The governor says, "I want it dealt with." The Speaker of the House says, "I want it dealt with." The President of the Senate says, "I want it dealt with." And I think they will deal with it, unlike other places that won't deal with it because people won't talk about it.
Well, and I believe me, I understand that there, in these types of things, there can be some hypocritical folks that are, doing one thing on one side and saying another.
Yes.
Don't do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah, I hear some people around gloating about, boy, look at this. Look at what happened to the mayor of Baltimore. Well, she's out. Okay.
But isn't it, Henry, equally a problem because of all of these? So essentially, what I've seen, and I can't speak to whether it's the entirety of dealings with the board of directors, but they're pointing out all of these cases where a board of director got business or was involved financially or financially benefited from the medical system. But isn't it possible that maybe some of those, maybe most of those, are legitimate, and that it's just a small part of those that are actually problematic?
Well, one of the individuals was the owner of Kelly Services. Well, Kelly Services takes care of health care benefits, and they are a very, very large provider within the state of Maryland. Health care benefits, University of Maryland Health Systems. There's a little bit of likelihood that they're going to cross paths, and that's probably one of the reasons that they got involved in sitting on the board. So, you don't get to the level of being appointed to a board without having some knowledge of the board that you're going to be part of.
Do you think that's a valuable thing to have a board member that is knowledgeable?
Good question.
I most certainly do, which differentiates that issue with this company versus the issue of selling books. That really, what benefit was that into the system? That was to gratify. And, but we also have the same thing, and you mentioned, oh, well, it's prevalent all over. We have the same thing, if you elect an official and they have a business that sometimes does government contracting, how is that decided upon what contractor we're going to go with?
Sounds like they need an ethics policy.
So let me ask you this, Ron, from your perspective, do you think it's a good idea to have those vertical element experts like the healthcare, folks or the insurance folks sitting on a board? Do you think that's valuable?
Yeah.
Okay, let me expand that question by one more, and I have a very strong opinion on this. Is there a circumstance, in your opinion, where a board member should be able to have financial dealings with the organization on whose board he sits or she sits?
As long as there's full disclosure and there's no vote taken by that person on an issue that deals specifically with them.
What about a competitive bid process?
If it's a competitive bid, it should be competitive.
Okay, so is that a situation you would think would need to be a part of any board member? So if a board member is involved, you have to get a certain number of bids. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. Should be at least 3 bids.
Okay.
If there are 3 willing bidders. Sometimes there's not. It all depends how the bid's spec'd. I've seen bids spec'd that only one person could bid on it.
And some of that is the benefit of the people who are the inside looking outside. saying, if you craft this bid this way, it will be easier for company X with owner Y to place the bid on that than a general contractor from our local community or someone from outside the area to put a bid on it. So sometimes they can tailor the bid that almost assures an individual company to win the bid.
We had it in when we built the jail. There were certain windows spec'd to be in the jail. Well, there was only, they were spec'd, only one company could bid on that window. So there was no, and the bid was lost to build a jail because of the windows that was used to go into the jail.
Speaker Bush suggests that legislation is absolutely forthcoming on this particular circumstance. Ron, in your view, does it rise to the level of needing legislation, or does it just need oversight in the short term to make sure that we're managing those relationships and we're managing the financial piece of that adequately?
I think it was a general nudge and a general threat that it could happen. I think if they come up with a way to police themselves immediately and deal with the issues that have happened, legislation may not be necessary. It's with legislation will have to be in by next week. Signing is what, the 6th or the 8th of April.
And actually, this board receives very little contribution from the state coffers. What receives more contribution, and it's through the cost of services, is the facilities that they oversee. So this board, in their guidance and direction, they don't get very much from the state of Maryland. So state of Maryland interacting, I think, put the public scrutiny on this. And maybe that's more beneficial than actually forcing some legislation through in less than a week, is to have the scrutiny there. And we already have seen some of the purge of the board of directors there. And I'm sure they're going to take some time to vet the future candidates. I know Ron's on the short list, so.
Henry, the UMMS leadership vowed to restore faith in the institution and the board. In your view, in your opinion, and this is strictly an opinion, do you think this is something that someone ignored purposefully? Is this an error of omission or commission?
I think it's an error of omission. I believe when we sit back and we analyze things, did the mayor of Baltimore deliberately force them to buy the books? I don't know. I think maybe they just didn't tie the
By the way,
strings together.
Mayor Pugh called this at one point a witch hunt.
Witch hunt flies around quite a bit in vernacular these days. So,
but you think it's an error of omission?
I don't. And the one with the health insurance, it's definitely an omission. I mean, he's doing a free bid and going through. But the book thing is someone picking up the phone, a subordinate calling another subordinate, say, hey, can you help me out here? I need some book sales. I don't know, but I would like to think by the time you get onto that level of board that you have respect, and your first and foremost job is the integrity of what that board services.
Ron?
I'll take this. I think it's a practice of carelessness. I think somebody fell asleep at the wheel over a period of time. Everything's being geared, watching other people, and I think a lot of boards, every once in a while, need to be challenged, step to the plate, and deal with the issue.
Should the mayor give back her $500,000 to?
If it's that big of a deal, probably, yeah, because the mayor's kind of the center. The mayor's not the issue. The issue is a board that's run amok. It's not just her. She's used as a scapegoat because of some of the things she said, because she's the mayor of Baltimore, et cetera. They have an overall problem of management that needs to be dealt with.
And you're going to get the last word on that. Coming up next, well, the legislative session may just be about over. April 6th, did you say, Ron?
6th or 8th.
6th or 8th. But we're calling it halftime because it's crossover week. It's the time when the bills that were approved in the Senate go to the House, and the bills approved in the House go to the Senate, and we start all over in that other body. We'll have that story and some of those bills coming up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. So the Maryland legislative session ends in early April, but recently was crossover day, where bills that were approved in the Senate go to the House and vice versa. We're going to take a look at a couple of those bills, and I'm going to ask our panelists to give their opinion on, number one, the bill, and number two, can it pass? Let's start them off. Let's talk about green schools. There's a bill that is crossing over for green schools. Henry, what say you on that one?
I think it's going to get some traction. I don't know the nuances of the bill itself, but if it's addressing new construction, then all for it. Let's build smarter, healthier schools for our planet and for our students. If it's doing a bunch of reinventing the wheel with existing structure, I think we're just pouring good money down a hole in that stead.
Ron?
I think this is in the architectural and the planning phase. It was
so you don't think
1.6 million. I don't think it has to do with bricks and mortar yet. I see it as figuring out how to go forward.
So new buildings going forward would be built to a more green standard.
Like here, I think one of the things should happen is there be a new green school that's a technical and trade school be built out on the chief property between the hospital and the community college, and move Tech High School into an ultra-modern green-type facility that does.
Why don't we avail the land that is already at WCPS central headquarters?
You've already got land out by the college, right next to the college. You tie into the STEM building, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. The medical side of it, which is the hospital, it's all there. Kids can go to a part-time at the college, in the STEM building. The college is very underutilized right now, so it's time to use what we have there.
Some of the legislature was concerned that the governor might throw his weight around to defund some litigation efforts by the Attorney General, and there's a bill in for funding the Attorney General's office that would essentially, at some level, take some of that ability for the governor to say no off of his plate. Ron, what say you on that one?
Well, we've had that discussion here. I think if the Attorney General's budget should increase, he can have the increase come from cases he's won that's brought money into the state of Maryland. I think then it allows him to increase it. And maybe for things that the state has to be, where they have to have legal representation by the Attorney General, that portion should not be touched. It should be increased.
All right. Henry?
I think it's more than likely going to pass. I think it's going to face a veto, and then we'll see where the chips fall. Normally, his vetoes are not sustained.
Okay. Anti-gerrymandering. Obviously, there's a lot going on with gerrymandering. There's a Supreme Court heard this week. Maryland is one of the two states that they were looking at for gerrymandering. What are your thoughts on the anti-gerrymandering bill, Ron?
I think this whole thing may kind of blow up.
Okay, tell me why.
You want one political party to go out and say it's being gerrymandered for another political party. So what are they doing? They're lobbying to have just their point of view recognized. I would point out that in the 6th Congressional District, who won the governorship in the 6th Congressional District? Governor Hogan. So I think with Republicans can vote, it doesn't matter. I've looked at how the new district is set up, where it runs right down, picks up a little more Frederick County, down into Montgomery County. I think the new one that was passed, it looks pretty decent myself, but I do not think that we need to have all of Carroll County as part of us. Then that is, again, gerrymandering at its worst.
Okay. Henry?
I think all of Carroll County, taken as a whole, is more representative of their politics as what Frederick County also is. And so I have no problem having all Carroll County. Maybe they have a problem wanting to be with all us people on the other side of South Mountain. I think it's not going to get the legs to get out of committee in the House. I believe the Senate has already passed that. It's down in the House now for consideration. I just don't think it's going to get the...
I'm wondering if it's all a moot point, if the Supreme Court is taking this up and is going to, at some point, issue
They may
a ruling.
approve the one that's there. They may not. Again, I see A little bit of Carroll County, a little bit of Montgomery County, I'll take that any day. All of Carroll County, no. All of Montgomery County, no.
All right. Taxing Airbnbs. So the argument here is that Airbnbs are not subject to the normal taxes that other hotel, motel, and even, I guess, even bed and breakfast potentially are subject to, and now they want to tax that. Henry, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, they're in a business. They are generating revenue, and they are providing a hospitality service. Why not have them exposed to the tax? I'm sorry for those people in the Airbnb business. I know it's their personal property or something along their personal property that they're renting out. I just think it makes sense. We should have a level playing field for the people who are competing in the same market area.
I agree with Henry.
Okay. All right, unpaid tolls. This, in my view, is a no-brainer, but I'm interested in your opinion. So folks from other states owe a lot of money to the state of Maryland for unpaid tolls, millions of dollars, I understand. And there's a bill trying to address that. Henry, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the bill trying to address that is actually to use a collection service to get the funds. I think that's the wrong way to approach it. I think we should work with reciprocity with the other states, that if they have unpaid tolls in Maryland and they live in Virginia, then Virginia can attach it to their registration renewal, and they can't renew their registration until they bring all their debts current.
Okay.
There was $102 million outstanding money, and I think you're on the right track, Henry. There should be a reciprocity arrangement set up with New Jersey, Connecticut.
I mean, we have it for other
95, coming up 95, that type of thing. Goodness gracious. They were going to give it to this company for $20 million.
Right.
Collection and lose 80-some million. That's not the way you deal with this. You deal with it by having reciprocity. I said I got a ticket coming across the Tappan Zee Bridge one time, got in the wrong lane, could not get into the toll booth. And they sent the bill. I got one on the Pennsylvania Turnpike one time, missed the exit. And they sent me a ticket. They only charged me from the one exit because I got off at the next exit and paid the toll. Mm-hmm. But God, they had it done. Why can't we do it here? Doesn't make sense. Something
I think the notification isn't the issue. I think it's the individual says, hey, I'm from New Jersey.
I'm not paying it.
What are they going to do to me? Well, if you have the reciprocity, you now have teeth in it. Okay, because if you get a fine or a speeding ticket or whatever, run a red light in Maryland, you're a Maryland resident, you're not renewing your registration until you pay your fines.
That's exactly right.
So why not go ahead and extend it to other states?
Okay. All right. Well, that's our summary on the bills. Coming up next, Fast Five. Stay with us. Welcome to Fast Five, where our three panelists talk about 5 issues in 7 short minutes. Let's start with Governor Hogan, who is pressing congressional leaders to increase funding for the Bay. Ron, what's the problem here, and why do we need more funding?
You know what was really neat? How they took $73 million, put a dot in the middle of it, and made it $7.3 million. I thought that was a stroke of genius by somebody that thought it wouldn't be caught, and it was. I think the governor had a press release that I really liked. He just said we were betrayed by the administration for the way this was done. This is a body of water that affects the entire country. It's something. He's the chairman of that Chesapeake Bay Executive Council. He knows the importance of it, and for the feds to cut it from $73 million back to $7.3 million when it should probably go up to $90 to $100 million because of what has to be done. All those programs that we've talked about with the fish coming back, with the grasses growing and all that stuff, we'll be right back where we started from years ago.
Well, and that's a good point, because we've read this story before and it didn't have a happy ending. Our bay has recently started coming back, but that wasn't always the case. Henry, what are your thoughts on this, issue?
It's interesting that the Fed slashed 90% of the budget, and it's wrong. Okay, the Bay it provides recreation, it provides revenue, not just for the state of Maryland, but for all the estuaries that are going into it. Virginia, Delaware benefits from it, Pennsylvania benefits from it, and of course, Maryland crabs. You don't get anything better than that. We're finally on the road and pointing in the right direction for recovery. Why would we abandon that effort now? I think we should go after, and we should have our congressional representatives, both in the House and the Senate, make sure that they get it marked up so that we can restore our funding.
All right. Mary Ann Lasante, who is the delegate who suggested what many are calling a racial slur. Her constituents, her home constituents now are continuing to call for her expulsion. Henry, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think she's running out things like Ralph Northam has, making a improper statement and just hoping that that will die down. When your home district is calling for your head, I think it's time to offer it up.
Okay. Ron?
I agree with that. I think that's a really good point, Henry. And I think maybe the guy from Iowa ought to follow the same.
Well, he was definitely censured too. So
censured's different than stepping down.
Right.
But that notwithstanding that, I think she was wrong in what she did. Does everybody that says something bad now get kicked out of office? He wasn't kicked out. I think there's a lot of emphasis being placed on this because of the political climate of the earth now, not just one place or the other. I'm not sure the answer to this whole thing is just every time somebody does something, they're kicked out.
Yeah.
To be censored, yes. To be kicked off of committees, I can see that happening. This is too widespread to just pick out her or a couple other ones in Maryland, Iowa, or wherever it is. This is a national issue, far more than what this lady did.
But Henry, is it possible? Do we leave open, and what I like to do is, should we judge a person by a single act, or should we judge it by the body of work? There was a radio personality, Don Imus.
Oh my gosh, and on that
about the basketball team.
On the basketball team. And, I mean, he knew seconds after he said it that was wrong. Bernie, his little cohort guy, knew seconds after it was wrong that he said it, and he got thrown off the air. Of course, he eventually came back. But the point is, if you look at the body of his work, he was clearly not a racist. Clearly, in my view at least. I have problems with us framing a person by a single event. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. But when you lose, and we don't know how, because it's not actually, no one's spending money to do a poll to see, has she lost the support of the majority of her constituents?
Right.
Okay.
And do you want to bet that the people that are calling for her head are those that didn't vote for her in the first place?
It's possible, but
probably her opponents, and that's
but,
who
but,
it is.
but when
her
when we get down to it, such as members of Congress who've been censured, then let us deal with the censure for her.
They did censor her.
But if people keep calling, people forgot about the governor of Virginia. You don't hear many calls for his resignation now. He rode out the wave. She let her try to ride out the wave. The individual from Iowa.
We have very short memories. Would you agree with that, Ron?
Absolutely short memories. It's not just this here. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. I'll tell you what is not going to be a short memory for me. We've got hundreds of dead people that are paid millions of dollars in Social Security.
Well, I wonder who's doing that.
I don't know. Who do you think's doing it, Ron?
It's unbelievable. Social Security would pay out that amount of money. In fact, this year alone, 1 year, $140 billion has been paid out wrong. In 1 year. And since what, 2004, like 1.6 trillion.
Yeah, that's not good. Henry, what are your thoughts?
We're just dealing with perpetual poor performance of federal government employees in this regard. I mean, as soon as a death record, when a death record is sent in,
is it a process?
It's a process that is.
Eric, I like what he just said. Is it an employee or a process?
It's a collective, okay? The employees who write the processes, okay, they are not communicating from death certificate to Social Security account to terminate benefits.
Okay.
Okay, there's a breakdown in that process. There are people who are overseeing these procedures, and how can they not connect point A to point B?
You've recently experienced a death in your family, is
Yes.
that accurate? Who notified whom when that death took place of Social Security to stop?
I believe my mother-in-law took the death certificate in and submitted that to Social Security.
Doesn't the funeral home do that? Isn't that a mandatory?
He was not. He did not go through a funeral home.
Oh.
Okay. He donated his body to science.
So let me ask this question.
Sorry.
Could some of these process problems be fixed
Sure.
if we didn't spend so much time every year preparing for a shutdown because the Congress can't get their act together and pass a budget or a continuing resolution? I mean, do you know how much time that we spend? I talk to people in government about this from whenever we have a shutdown, and they spend weeks preparing for these possible shutdowns, because even though they're not necessarily considered an essential service, they still have to figure out some way to deal with what's going on.
That's
Rhetorical question.
Well, it's not rhetorical. It's a good, valid question. The things that we get hung up on in this country, then we talk about waste. We're always talking about how much waste there is, and we always blame it on certain groups of people when, in fact, how many people were they paying that's over 112 years old? Thousands of people that was over 112 years old that were still living. There's 20 in the world.
Yeah.
And they were paying for thousands.
All right, locally, our commissioners have ideas for updating the ethics policy and perhaps the formation of the Ethics Commission. Ron, what do you think on that one?
I think it's a 50-50. 50-50, I think one commissioner's headed head on and the other commissioner's fishing. Okay.
Okay.
And the one that's fishing, to me, was a campaign promise to appoint certain people. And I don't think it's the people that's being appointed that's not doing the ethical job. I think it's because there's not an ordinance specifically saying what should be dealt with. The Herald Mail printed an article. The Ethics Commission came back with a commissioner that violated ethics, but because that commissioner did not, it wasn't monetarily, was let go scot-free. Is that right? And that's happened on a couple of different issues. So the issue is who's appointed.
Well, the question becomes: was the commissioner wrong, or was the policy as it's defined wrong?
That's my point.
Okay.
The Ethics Commission came back with written information saying the commissioner was wrong what he did. But there's nothing in the ethics ordinance to chastise the commissioner.
But this goes back to
So then it wasn't wrong. I mean, per the policy, it wasn't wrong. True?
That's a difficult question to answer.
But if the ethics policy does not suggest that it's wrong, I have a hard time enforcing something.
They couldn't enforce it. They could report that it was wrong, but they couldn't enforce anything.
They could report in their opinion that it was wrong, but,
yes,
but
and
according to the ethics policy, it was not wrong.
As it was written up, they did that.
Okay.
And then with what this individual wants to do, a commissioner wants to have certain organizations say that they appoint somebody, school board. They say we want to, like the Teachers Association, to have a vote.
why should one individual or group have more voice than another? The process right now is you send in a self-nomination, and then you are selected by the commissioners and are appointed to the committee, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The problem that we're talking about right here is same thing that we talked about in the previous question. It's policies and procedures. Okay, if your policies and procedures and you find a violation and you have no teeth in those violations to sanction, then it's worthless to have a policy against it. You have to have some way in which it's a penalty that is communicated to the individual for breaking the policies and procedures. We don't have that. They write it up in the newspaper, okay, sorry, and we moved on.
All right.
How do you deal with that? The Teachers Association, as an example, already endorsed people for a job.
Yes, they do.
So, and they're going to be on the Ethics Commission? Hello? I'm sorry. That's not how this works. I still think one commissioner ran on a policy of open government, transparent government, and strong ethics. Strong ethics doesn't have a thing to do with who do you point to be the watchdog. It's the ordinance that you have what they need to enforce.
And you're going to get the last word on that because we've got a WTF, that's what the flip side piece of this that we got to get to. So in, I believe it was Owings Mills, Maryland, there's a cemetery called Druid Ridge. And the Druid Ridge has been a cemetery for however many number of years. And now there's a group that wants to lop off part of it and sell it for development. And a legal battle has ensued. I have many thoughts on this, not the least of which is, anybody ever watched the movie Poltergeist? Do we know what happens when we build houses on a cemetery? Henry, what do you think about that one?
Well, it's gone through district court, special appeals, and then it was challenged again.
Right.
And first time they found in favor of the people who owned the land and
That wanted to develop. Right.
Second time around, they said, no, it's not unambiguous, the language, because it was titled in the deed what was, and the purpose of it was to function as a cemetery.
Right.
And they said, you have to function as a cemetery, that's what it says. I guess they thought they could challenge it and wear the locals out on court challenges and they eventually prevail. I think is a really, really bad idea.
To what?
To develop land that was set aside for your ancestor, your great-grandfather is buried there, let's say, and now they want to convert it over into a commercial property, whether it's the land that was used as a part of the cemetery or land that was set aside to be part of the cemetery. Just leave it as a cemetery. Yes, the neighborhood changes, but you have, that's where you have planned. You didn't plan for it to be a commercial development.
And I also think it would set a very dangerous precedent.
Oh, yes.
For, who's to say somebody's not going to come in and say, this Confederate war, we don't need that.
Well, I can see an accessory use to cemetery business being put there, whether it's a mausoleum or whatever. My problem isn't anything that you guys talk about. My problem was with how a lobbyist got to the chairman of a committee who said he didn't have time to go through it. Go ahead and you present the bill. Okay, and then they got caught, and then all at once the chairman of the committee, who's from Montgomery County, withdrew. That's where I get into the problem.
So you have a problem with a lobbyist going to a chairman of a committee?
No,
in what world doesn't that happen?
I have a problem with it not being a local person. The local person didn't have the nerve to do it, and they went through a lobbyist to go to the chairman of the committee. That's where I have a problem.
And I'm going to quote Rodney Dangerfield, going back to my movie quotes here in this segment, Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack, who said, golf courses and cemeteries, biggest waster of prime real estate. And I'm going to get the last word on that.
Good job.
Coming up next, on the flip side, we have thumbs up, thumbs down. Stay with us. Welcome to Thumbs Up, Thumbs Down, where our panelists get to talk about what is good and bad in their opinion for the week. Henry, start us off.
Okay, the Mueller report. It's done. I don't care what's in it. It's done. The boondoggle of money that we spent in this country over this report, it's still over. Let's take the results there. Let's move past what the issues were and go forward. Okay, that's my thumbs up. The thumbs down, I think just with that's good enough news. I don't need to offer a thumbs down.
My thumbs up is similarly positioned. I, too, am glad that the Mueller report is complete. I think that for no one will it bring closure, because I think that those that think that Trump colluded with Russia will still think that, and those that are convinced that he didn't will still think that. So I don't think anybody is to gain except for the lawyers and the people that were beneficiaries of all the money we spent putting this report together. My thumbs down is the fact that no matter who is in political office, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, they are going to be subject to this. And going back to Bill Clinton and the elements that surrounded him, and frankly, you know, I think if you look back on Bill Clinton's presidency, I think he did a pretty daggone good job. And now President Trump and President Obama, the right, you know, who is completely indignant that that folks are against President Trump at this point. They certainly had more than their fair share of stories and concerns about President Obama, which they talked about on talk radio and certain news stations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's my thumbs down, is the fact that it doesn't matter, because the craziness is just going to continue, and we're going to continue to go up the crazy ladder. Ron?
My thumbs down is going to go to the administration for taking funds away from the Chesapeake Bay. I think it's ill-advised, and it's a blight on the leadership of the Environmental Protection Agency, that they would recommend that money be taken away with such an important body of water to the country. I'm going to agree with you guys on my thumbs up for the Mueller report, but I wouldn't call it a boondoggle. The amount of money that they have uncovered that will come back to the federal government will dwarf what the taxpayers put in to litigate the Mueller report. The amount of money from a whole bunch of different people that wasn't paying taxes is going to come back 3-4-fold as to what it was. So
They still
it was,
haven't got money from
it was, they can get out, that's fine. But there's still others out there that there's money going to come back. So to say that it was a cost to the taxpayers, somewhat of a misleading statement.
All right, that's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. And we hope you will join us again next week for another episode of The Flip Side. Good night.